From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South. I'm Jose Daniel Lopez. The well-documented struggles of migrants trying to cross into Mexico hasn't stopped more from living in a search of a better future. A group of migrants from El Salvador is now making its way across Guatemala.
A number of Salvadorian churches are holding mass prayers for the hundreds of migrants that left the country heading to the United States. They want those people to be safe.
We have made a call on all churches that are on the way to the United States, and even churches in the United States, to please open their hearts to these migrants.
The first caravan, made up of 400 people, walked towards the country's western border. Truck drivers offered to take them in their vehicles so they could get there faster.
There might be more work over there than over here. There's nothing here. Only crime. We are in a very bad situation.
The caravan was accompanied by police, aid workers, and human rights activists. Processing at the border was swift, thanks to an increase in border agents to help those migrants. Only those without the correct documentation were returned to San Salvador.
There were about 28 or 30 people who did not have their documents in order, so they were sent back.
There have been calls on social media to form a new caravan set to leave on Wednesday. This, as the people continue to flee.
Despite attacks by both the Guatemalan and Mexican police, a second migrant caravan has succeeded in crossing into Mexico. After being blocked on Sunday, they struggled to cross the Suchiate River in a desperate attempt to flee Honduras to reach the United States. Some could be seen carrying their children into the water as police officers waited for them on the Mexican shore. Activists have condemned these actions as it raises the migrants' risk of drowning. An estimated 2,000 children make up a large part of the caravan. Many are reportedly dealing with various types of respiratory problems. This is due to difficulties of the road and a lack of shelter, which has left them exposed to weather conditions. Authorities are calling for the overall protection of these minors.
Many have a fever. They're having acute bronchitis and respiratory problems. We estimate there are more or less 2,000 children who are traveling with this caravan. Some 500 are very, very young. It's not only the problem with transportation, but we're making a call to highlight the dimension of the crisis we are facing. That is why it is very important that the Mexican state determines what will be the model for attention for this population, but mainly the population of girls, boys, and teenagers who are migrating.
Our correspondent in Mexico, Pablo Perez, tells us more.
A second migrant caravan has faced many risks while crossing into Mexico after being blocked by police forces in the border Guatemala city of Tecumán and Hidalgo. One migrant died, struck by a rubber bullet in the head. Now migrants have decided to cross through the river. Another Honduran almost died, but he is now being treated in a hospital in Tapachula, Chiapas. Chiapas is the stop where they decide to rest before resuming their journey heading north to reach their first caravan group.
Thank you, Pablo, for that report. On Monday, the first group of migrants arrived to the community of Santiago Niltepec in the state of Oaxaca.
Before the sun can burn their skin and make the road unbearable to walk on, thousands of migrants left the town of Tapanetepec in Oaxaca. They were nervous when passing by the checkpoint monitored by the National Migration Institute, but everything went okay. The important thing for them was to find at least a little space in any vehicle to make the walk a little shorter.
We wait for a ride. This is hard because sometimes they can't take us and our two little girls.
Women and children are the ones who struggle the most to continue, but they show their strength and refuse to stop.
I am a single mother with 4 kids. I want them to go to school, and I can't do it on my own. It's difficult to feed them and buy them clothes. We left so they can prosper and have a better life.
The towns they have stopped at have provided support for all children. The little ones are aware of the effort their parents make and the reason for which they left their country.
My mom had no job, and my real dad forced us out of the house with a machete. He sent gangs after us.
Yaimi couldn't take care of her 4 kids anymore. She makes traditional Honduran baleadas and sells them to her caravan mates.
We came to work, not to do bad things, as I say. I said this because I need to feed my kids, and I work for it.
The first group remains together. More than 5,000 Central Americans stay strong, regardless of threats made by the US president, who already announced he will send military troops to stop them.
United States authorities have announced they plan to deploy over 5,000 armed troops to their southern border.
By the end of this week, we will deploy over 5,200 soldiers to the southwest border. That is just the start of this operation. We'll continue to adjust the numbers and inform you of those, but please know that's in addition to the 2,092 that are already employed from our National Guard Operation Guardian support that's been so effective.
But troops at the border city of El Paso are already preparing for the migrants' arrival. President Donald Trump has alluded to a direct confrontation between the troops and the migrants, saying on Twitter that soldiers will be waiting for the caravan. Previously, U.S. defense officials had said the military will not have an active law enforcement role at the border. Mexican President-elect Andrés Manuel López Obrador has announced that the construction of Mexico City's new international airport will be stopped. The decision comes after citizens voted in a referendum to decide whether construction of the airport should continue. The funds will instead be invested into building new airstrips for a military base outside the city. The airport project had long been mired in controversy for corruption allegations to concerns about its environmental impact.
Because of this wise decision made by the citizens, the federal government will save around 100 billion pesos. We will work to resolve the problems at the current airport in Mexico City.
After a 6-hour hearing, the lawsuit of WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange against the government of Ecuador was rejected by a court in capital Quito. Our correspondent Denise Herrera has the details.
It took 20 minutes for Judge Karina Martinez to make the decision that the arguments presented by Julian Assange's legal team were irrelevant. She ruled that Assange must follow the new rules laid out for him by the Ecuadorian government. According to the prosecutor, this new rule seeks to improve his living conditions in the Ecuadorian embassy.
They cannot demand that the Ecuadorian government do something that does not correspond to them. Mr. Assange and his lawyers have to reach an agreement with the British government, and that's it.
The ruling is in our side. The Ecuadorian state saw the need to regulate Mr. Assange's living conditions inside the diplomatic mission in London.
One of Julian Assange's lawyers, Carlos Poveda, questioned the judge's decision, saying it was unjustified, and some statements made by the prosecutor. He confirmed they plan to appeal the decision.
During the hearing, we get more input than a sentence. The subject of the claim is that the UK has issued a type of security assurance so that Julian Assange may leave the embassy. Obviously, we asked the government to show it. As the prosecutors expressed, it is that the United Kingdom, via simple letters, has stated that Julian Assange cannot be extradited to a country where there's a death sentence. Our concern goes further. A petition which states that Julian Assange will not be extradited to the United States.
During the hearing, the WikiLeaks founder stressed that his life is at risk and that other WikiLeaks members have already received death threats. He accused the Ecuadorian government of leaking scandalous material about him as a way to eventually justify his extradition to the United States. Denise Herrera, Telesur, Ecuador.
We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this.
Telesur brings you special interviews with social and political personalities. Monday, from Washington. Tuesday, from Mexico. Wednesday, from Caracas. Thursday, from Quito. Friday, from Havana. Analysis about our continent's reality. Weekdays, only on Telesur. The ruling world order has always subjugated the masses. But who are the actors behind every move? What are their real interests? We analyze every move on Critical Move. Weekdays, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. In his first interview after winning the presidential election in Brazil, Jair Bolsonaro has said he may treat social movements as terrorists. One of the movements he referred to was the landless workers movement. Bolsonaro also said a weapon law is a priority to give civilians a right to carry a gun. He also said he is going to support privatization of state companies. And the president-elect and his team are ready to start transition talks with the current administration. According to the Chief of Staff, Eliseo Padilla, the transition will soon start. Padilla also said Bolsonaro's team is now deciding who is going to be part of the transition committee to meet shortly.
The current government will hand over to the future government, to the transition team, what steps the government will take in the first 120 days so that there is no continuity problem. But of course, they will also work on their program.
Chilean President Sebastián Piñera has signed the controversial private pension reform. The bill is aimed at reforming a privatizing pension scheme designed by his brother José Piñera. Now the reform will be sent to Congress for its approval. The bill will require to provide a gradual 4% to employers who were excluded from contributing until now.
Without a doubt, this is a very important reform that means a huge effort for the private sector that will have to gradually finance that 4% of additional contribution, but also for the public sector because the total cost for the public sector reaches $3,500 million of US dollars.
The executive director of the International Monetary Fund has approved changes made to the multi-billion-dollar loan for Argentina's government.
The austerity measures that are part of the 2019 budget are some of the worst the country has had to face. They are part of the demands the IMF made to control inflation, but what's likely to follow is further recession and job cuts in the public sector.
We are saying no to the adjustment budget that is taking away our sovereignty. This budget is damaging the everyday life of women and represents backtracking in matters of health and education.
I think that people are very aware of what's happening, and they are organizing demonstrations that are growing inside. The issue is that the government refuses to listen.
In exchange for more funds and an earlier disbursement for next year, the government of Mauricio Macri has agreed to implement further economic adjustments.
This budget prioritizes money over people in order to pay a ballooning debt. No public budget has seen an increase in funds. This is a government that turns its back on the people.
The early release of funds will in no way help the economic crisis the country is going through, according to analysts.
The IMF is now in charge of our economic policies. The parameters for public spending are being set up by the IMF. It will be near impossible for the government to achieve its goals.
The austerity measures hitting the Argentine people are being dictated by the IMF. They have already started to affect those most vulnerable in society.
Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel has officially opened the Havana International Trade Fair, a platform for trade promotion and foreign investment. Over 6 companies from dozens of countries are taking part in the event, which runs until the 2nd of November. The annual event in Havana draws hundreds of businesses and government delegations from around the world.
Despite the worsening economic, commercial, and financial blockade against our country and the regression in the bilateral relationship due to the posture taken by the new administration in the United States, we continue to count on the participation of companies from that country that recognize the mutual benefits of the links with Cuban businesses.
The Bahamas is set to get $106 million cash intervention from the Caribbean Development Bank. It is intended to help the countries achieve development goals, such as the provision of quality climate resilient infrastructure. Additionally, interventions will address gender equality and security and citizen security. The program of assistance will be implemented over the period of 2018 to 2022.
Difficult decision to evacuate residents.
The Jamaican government has cleared its debt to the state's public service company for repairing malfunctioning street lights. According to the Minister of Local and Community Development, the debt lasted for over 7 years and stood at $7 billion US. Over 4 billion of it had been paid, as it was preventing residents from getting street lights repaired. A Jamaican mother and her son were reunited 31 years after he was abducted and taken to the United States. Leading man Lewis spoke publicly for the first time since her son Jermaine was found this week.
I want to encourage other families with missing children and loved ones not to ever give up hope on finding them. I am the proof that after 31 long years of suffering, 31 long years, one should never give up, but be patient, be strong, and believe that all things are possible.
The Dominican Republic is celebrating the founding of the continent's very first university. More in this report.
The Autonomous University of Santo Domingo, the first in America, celebrates 480 years of existence.
A university loaded with history, cultural heritage, humanity. It's a university that collects not only everything regarding professional training, but also all of the struggles of the Dominican people.
Its original name was St. Thomas Aquinas University, and it was created by a papal decree by Pope Paul III on October 28, 1538.
This institution has served both the Dominican Republic and the American continent. In its origins, our university brought together renowned intellectuals and academics from throughout the American continent, from Venezuela, Mexico, Cuba, Puerto Rico. This was the cradle of civilization of the Western world, and the university played a fundamental role.
People from all across the world have graduated from this university.
What we want is what we are, a public, open, democratic, and participatory university where everyone has rights and a space to study, so that those most excluded of the Dominican Republic also have access to come to the Autonomous University of Santo Domingo to prepare themselves.
Neither dictatorships nor catastrophes, not even foreign invasions, have been able to put out the flame of knowledge that lives in this school.
We'll take a short break now. More news in a minute.
Enjoy our programming from Monday to Friday, where you'll find the best information on culture, innovation, conservation, human well-being, Keep up to date on the latest innovations in science and technology with Atomun. The habits and knowledge you need to live a healthy lifestyle are on Guide Your Body. Environmental consciousness is required to preserve our Earth. Undergo your transformation on Green Zone. All about equity, diversity, and respect for identities on By Gender. Cultural manifestations, the art in all its forms, and the stories of real lives. Every day we feature a wide variety of content, only on Telesur, the news source from Latin America and the Caribbean.
Welcome back. Indonesia has intensified its search for passengers an airplane that crashed into the sea with 189 passengers on board. Search and rescue agencies Basarnas has sent divers out in deep waters to look for victims and wreckage. Underwater beacons have also been deployed to trace the flight's black box recorders. The plane crashed minutes after it left Jakarta. Indonesia's president met with relatives as he ordered round-the-clock searches.
I have ordered them to keep working tonight for 24 hours, using lights to speed up this search, to find the body of the aircraft, which hasn't been found, even though we already know its location.
The fiancé of murdered Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi has called for all those responsible for his killing to be brought to justice. She spoke at a memorial event in London.
Myself and my government, in respect to this matter, want all of those responsible, from those who gave the order to those who carried it out, from the bottom to the top, to be tried and to receive the necessary punishments according to international law.
The city of Venice has been flooded due to overflowing rivers. Officials say 75% of the city is underwater, forcing authorities to close St. Mark's Square. High winds have also caused trees to uproot as multiple weather warnings have been issued. 6 people have died in storms across the country. French President Emmanuel Macron has met Ethiopia's Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed as the African leader kicks off his European tour. The two leaders discussed plans for urban development and cultural cooperation. Talks also centered on a development strategy for Ethiopian air transport. Macron praised the Ethiopian Prime Minister's economic and political reforms, especially the recent election of the country's first female president. Abiy's next stop will be Germany. The main opposition parties in the Democratic Republic of Congo have agreed to back a single presidential candidate. That nominee will run against the government's candidate in upcoming general elections. The opposition believes it will stand its best chance of victory as a united front. Elections will be held on December 23rd. Nigeria's military opened fire on Shia Muslim protesters in the capital Abuja. Members of the Islamic Movement of Nigeria took to the streets demanding the release of religious leader Ibrahim Zakzaki, detained since 2015. Hundreds have reportedly been killed in a crackdown by security forces since the leader's detention. According to an eyewitness, some protesters threw stones at the military before the shooting began. The Organization of South African Trade Unions has called for an immediate and unconditional end to the United States economic blockade on Cuba. The National Union of Mine Workers and the National Education and Health Workers Unions are urging worldwide support for Cuba. They also They have also asked the United Nations to play a proactive role in ending the blockade. A baby and a pregnant woman were among 7 killed by raging wildfires in South African farming settlement. The country's disaster management says the blaze destroyed over 15,000 hectares. The fires forced a precautionary evacuation of 3 suburbs, housing more than 1,000 people. The world's wildlife population has fallen by a staggering 60% in just 4 decades. This according to the latest report from the World Wildlife Fund. The report says climate change and environmental destruction have created a mind-blowing crisis. Current rates of species extinctions are now up to 1,000 times higher than before. The report also found that animal life dropped most rapidly in tropical areas of Latin America and Caribbean, within an 89% fall in populations. And we come to the end of this news brief. This and many other stories you can find at our website at telesurtv.net/English. And for our African viewers, remember you can find us on StarSat channel 461 in South Africa and channel 539 in Nigeria. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Jose Dani Lopez. Thank you for watching.